Gonna get started. Welcome everybody to our newest episode of Chat with the Chief. Uh, I really enjoy doing this because it gives me an opportunity to not only learn from my guests, but to listen to the so insightful questions that you have. Again, this is just a informal conversation between two professionals talking about a role that is very confusing sometimes, and we want to help clear some of that confusion. As we get started, like I said, Chat with the Chief, it's every month. And I hope you enjoy these amazing guests that I have because I have grown to really respect their perspectives and I always learn. So, a little bit about me before you get started, because I see I've got some new people on the call and I've got some people who have joined me in the past. My name is Anne Marie Otanes, and I am a chief of staff. I am I love this role, and there's days where I don't love this role, but I have found my niche. And why do I feel I can do what I'm doing? I come with a perspective. I've worked with various companies across the industries, and I wanted to share a little bit of that with you. A couple years ago, I wrote a book about being the chief of staff. I had great reception, so I'm in the process of writing my second book. I tell everybody I love trifectas, so there will be a third. So I'm going to have a trifecta of chief of staff books for you to read and learn more about this role and to keep you more informed. But like I said, this gives you a little bit of insight into who I've worked for so you understand what colors my perspective and why I have the views that I have. I am the chief of staff architect. I've been doing this for over 15 years. I started out as a project manager. I'm ITIL certified. I think Scrum Master now requires recertification. And so I was a Master back in the day, and I am ProSci certified change management practitioner. I also have the Chief of Staff Academy, which is a program where you get coaching with me. It's different than the ones that are out there because you work with me one-on-one, as well as you go through a program, whether you're a new chief of staff or you're curious about the role, or you're an existing chief of staff and you want to just up-level yourself. This is a great way to get started. The meat. So this is my last slide before I walk away. I met Krys last year, and I love to tell the story. We met for a quick coffee, and we saw each other, and it was like I had found somebody that I had been missing in my life forever. We instantly clicked. She is a badass chief of staff. I'm just going to say that. She currently is a chief of staff at
Nice.
NACE. Thank you. And I have a little blurb about her here, but I'm going to give Krys an opportunity to just tell you just how amazing she is. So, Krys, please feel free to introduce yourself to my wonderful, wonderful folks that have joined the call today.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, good morning, Anne Marie. Thank you for having me again. Hello to all the chiefs of staff out there. My name is Krys Ardafio. As mentioned, I'm currently the chief of staff at the National Association of Colleges and Employers. We're a membership association that really helps to influence the college to career pipeline. We've got about 18,000 members. So if you Google whatever institution you went to and then that acronym NACE, it will pop up. You will be surprised, but we are in the background doing our thing, ensuring that the new workforce is skilled up and ready to go. So I really come to this conversation sort of with a dual lens as someone that has a career myself, is responsible for the careers of others, and works in the industry of careers. So my job is jobs, I like to say.
I love
Um,
it. I love it. So let me tell you how things are going to go. Like I said, I've got some of my folks that always join, so you know the drill. For those of you that are new, Krys and I've got a couple questions I want to ask her. We're going to have, like I said, a very informal conversation. There's one more slide outside of this, but then there's no slide where, as you have questions, pop them in the chat. My assistant is on the line, and we will try to grab those questions and ask them for you. We do leave time at the end for a more formal Q&A because we do get peppered with amazing, amazing questions. And so feel free to relax, grab your coffee, your tea, your scone, whatever you've got, and we are just going to talk. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and there should be either a Q&A button for you to add your questions. You can put it in the chat, or if you raise your hand also, we'll see if we can get to you. But Krys, let's start from the beginning. Let's just talk about the role of the chief of staff. So chief of staffs, we're always connecting a variety of different groups of people: HR, L&D, DEI, all of the business units. Where, with your experience, where do you see that there's usually misalignment? Because that opens it up for some amazing things, but some very confusing things.
Yeah, that's very true. We kind of sit like air traffic control. We see it all. We're working across the groups, and I would say there are a couple of places actually.
Hmm.
There's oftentimes a misalignment with anybody managing product, and then on your sales and marketing side, right?
Yep.
Those are pretty apparent. But then when we talk about sort of this like career development and educating the organization in that lane, I would say that there's, especially right now, a disconnect between DEI and HR and L&D. And by a disconnect, it doesn't have any negative connotation. It just means
Right.
there's some alignment or some shifting that has happened, and we all now have to work to get back on board. And I kind of think that some of the root of it, whenever there's a misalignment, is usually some sort of misunderstanding or
Mhm.
miscommunication. And I think that we have some maybe old or outdated assumptions about DEI, and what it really is, and what type of talent does it cultivate, because you'll often hear the phrase, well, but we want qualified people, as if it's mutually exclusive, right?
Right. Right.
Um, so that's where I often see some misalignment.
And then what, so for you, like when you see this misalignment, because I know when I see it, I'm all about making sure that I'm chatting with folks, keeping my connections. How do you start to fix that misalignment, especially if you've been in the role for a minute? Like, what are the things that you've done to help with that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think first it's those conversations. I think you just have to have these open, honest, candid conversations to really understand who people are and why they have the lens that they have, or what prior experiences that they're, coming to this space with that have them hold the beliefs that they have, which may absolutely be true for them and for their experience, but then just sort of bringing their experience and aligning it more closely with the organization and what our missions are and what we're driving towards. And I think that once you do that and you have built that rapport, you can then provide a little more education and awareness, and most importantly, concrete examples.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Like, here's where DI and HR have aligned really well and brought in great talent. It could be an example, a concrete example from not in your organization or industry, or just within your own organization, because sometimes people just forget.
Hmm. Kathy, so Kathy is my girl. So I saw your hand was up and you and I were on the same wavelength with your question. So Kathy, I'm hoping that Krys answered that, because that was my thing too, is when you see the misalignment, you've got all these personalities, you want to wrangle them in. We use the term herding cats for so many different roles, but I think it's really evident when you're chief of staff, because you've got a lot of very strong personalities who are driven by wanting to do the right thing. You do have
Yeah.
those various characters every now and then, but I think most of the time, at least my experience, and I know with yours, you've got people who just want to do the right thing. And so they may be very myopic in their view and hyper focused and miss the big picture. And as the chief of staff, you have to step back and say, I may not be invested in these independent silos, but I'm invested in the entire org. And like you said, you start to find, well, this is where it worked well together. What happened in this situation that caused us to work well together? And how do we continue to do that moving forward? So,
Yeah.
Kathy, I hope that that answers your question, but it was a really, really good one. Your
Really quick too.
Yeah.
And I think you, because you said answering questions, and it clued me to remember to say that in those conversations that we have and that education and awareness, I want to be very clear. It's not always like going in and telling people how to think or what to do.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's coming in and asking those questions. Well,
Yes.
what if we didn't take proactive measures to make sure we included all types of people in the workforce? What would our organization actually look like? What skills would we be missing had we not looked at different types of hires or people? So I think it's asking those questions.
Yeah. And asking questions is not negative. Asking
Exactly.
questions means you're trying to gain context. You want
Hmm.
you want to be inclusive, you want to understand, but you also want to come from a place where, again, you want to see the big picture. And
Hmm.
don't we always say you don't know what you don't know? And so let's not make those assumptions. I've made those assumptions, and uh, I don't want to make them as much as I did in the past. And so asking questions is really, really healthy. Now, your background, you are deeply rooted in the educational industry, helping, I think it's either just new people who are moving into the workforce or even those who've been in the workforce upskill. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that is so important today?
Right, right. So my background is kind of, you said you like trifectas. I've kind of got this trifecta background. I like to say that I'm heavily steeped in first workforce
Hmm.
and then education, higher ed, and then business, right? And interestingly, education has become more like a business. So that has worked out really well. My area of expertise currently is early talent, but for the longest, particularly having worked at community colleges or grad programs like MBA programs, you will get a lot of people who are not early in their careers, right?
Yeah.
And so, ask me your question one more time to make sure I get everything in there.
So, coming from that perspective, education, like talk to us a little bit about why it's so important for us as we're developing our roles. Like, what is the role that education is going to play in all of this?
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, that was the piece I wanted to make sure I got in there. So, the connection between education and the talent and talent pipeline is directly connected. And that's oftentimes where you see workforce professionals because a lot of what we do is match up what is the need and what are the skills that we're training for. And they also have to match up in time. So, you have to project outward. What types of skills do you think you might need in the next 3 to 4 years? And therefore, what is higher ed
Mhm.
doing to train to that. So you have to move at the same trajectory. And so I think that higher ed has become incredibly nimble and flexible. You see a lot of higher ed institutions offering things online. You see a lot of certifications being offered, and you see a lot of staying with the times in terms of what types of skills, especially in technology, that are needed and really training towards those. You also see, and people don't realize this, but with like executive education all the way over to work-based education or on-the-job training, you see employers come to education institutions a lot to get
Mhm.
additional training. I actually did my project management certificate on site at my job, and the institution came there. At the time, it was IUPUI, but that's Indiana University, Purdue University, actually had a program where they would go on site and do those types of trainings. And so you very much see where it is intertwined, as they call it, town and gown, meaning the town around the institution. It works really well when they're very invested and understand each other really well so that we can accommodate each other, grow together, and ensure each other's success.
That's that's amazing because I've not heard of that before. And the fact that you had the institution invested in you and you were already a seasoned professional and you were just looking for further credentials. Can you talk a little bit about the difference in doing something like that, the certificate programs, or for those people who they want to do an MBA or they want to do that executive training in the evening? Like, what are the similarities? What are the differences? Are there recommendations to do one versus the other?
Yeah, I think it depends,
Yeah.
right? It really depends on what are you looking for? What is going to move your career forward? What skills are you trying to get? Because I think that would dictate if you are doing a degree bearing program or
Right.
you're doing a certificate or a training. So I think it really depends. I think it depends what industry you're in, what organization you're in. And so I think that talking to other people that have gone through those programs or are in the place where you are trying to get to and
Mhm.
finding out what they would have done. Because by the way, it also shifts. There are some things maybe that I have done that I think, well, maybe you didn't really need to do that here and now. Maybe I
Right.
focus more on skills. Maybe I wouldn't have done done a full-on MBA. I'm currently in a PhD program, right? Like, well, do you need it and for what? So particularly in my industry, if I were to go back into education, yes, having a PhD helps because that is often the basis for your career trajectory is that those letters, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I think it really depends, and you should look very closely at and really pull apart the pieces as to what you're trying to achieve. And there's also a big feeling about it. Some people just want some certain degree, or they just want some certain credential or training program, and that counts as well. So
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
feelings count too.
Yeah. So we're talking, so you said a few acronyms. I'm going to use the acronym right now that seems to be the hot one, AI. You're
Yes.
talking about education, you're talking about upskilling. AI has completely changed the landscape for so many individuals, so many organizations. How do you see AI reshaping a lot of that, especially in the educational space, and then for the professionals, folks like you and I who uh, do I need to get a certificate to say that I'm AI competent, outside of using AI for note taking?
Right? Exactly. Right? Yeah, because there are levels to this thing, to this
Yes.
AI thing. And so you're right. AI has changed a lot of things. And I know that our organization actually offers an AI boot camp. Many places offer it. So which one do you get? What skills are you getting out of it? Is it going to the depth and level that you need? And is that depth and level congruent with the needs of the business that you're going back to serve, right? So those are all things to think about. I think one of the major shifts that it's created is it's really heightened or quickened our move from the industrial economy, which is what we're coming out
Hmm.
of, into this knowledge economy. And that means what that means for training and development and learning is a shift from these very like static skills like data management, data center management, those
Right.
types of things, which are very episodic also, which maybe every couple of years you go and get some learning or training. It has shifted that to these very much like continuous ecosystem of training. Like we're all always learning something, whether it's a podcast or a short boot camp or a certificate. So it's this continuous training ecosystem, and it's moving more towards like less static skills, but like adaptability as a
Mhm.
skill or collaboration. Those are the types of skills we're now looking for to be able to manage AI, because AI could do the work for you in a lot of instances,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, yeah.
Wow. So, in talking about AI, upskilling, building skills, and let's talk a little bit about workforce and the workforce that's coming in. And again, I've got a lot of folks that are on my call who are seasoned chief of staffs, workforces, people who are in the workforce today. How do you think traditional job descriptions are changing because of everything that you shared? Because uh,
Yeah.
no two chiefs are the same. That's true, but that's the nuance. Every chief of
Yeah.
staff has to know how to do some certain things. We
Yeah.
all have to know how to be a liaison for our principal. It doesn't matter if you're in the entertainment industry versus healthcare. There are certain skills that every chief needs. So are
Mhm.
no jobs descriptions holding us back? Are we looking at them correctly? Like, what is your insight on that?
Yeah, you have to be changing your job descriptions. So we have moved to an era of skills-based hiring, and good job descriptions do reflect that, and they'll list a lot of the skills that you need. That's over degree requirements and for early talent, GPA, like all of that is really taking kind of, it's an and proposition. It's not always like an or. So it's an and, it's got to be those things. And what are the skills that you're looking for? The other thing would be, which is, let me just say also, as employers move to skills-based hiring, most new grads and early talent, if you use that phrase with them, they do not know what that means, skills-based hiring, but they know they're involved in it, right? Like they
Yeah.
know to go in on their interview and be able to articulate their skills. Here are my skills: critical thinking, teamwork, communication. What are the
Yep.
skills that you actually bring? I will say also there has been a rise in the phrase AI
Mhm.
in job descriptions, although it's still not huge. I think it's only like 10% of job descriptions. Don't quote me on that, but I just know it's a very small amount of job
Yeah.
descriptions that actually include the word AI, but it has increased by a lot
Mhm.
over a short period of time. I would also say that there are a lot of myths out there about early talent and AI. And I will say, for example, I know we already in the workplace, in our roles, are very attuned to AI and the shifts and the changes, and that's all we talk about.
Mhm.
However, on their internships, AI skills ranked last of the skills that are obtained by early talent that are out on their internships. So even though we're talking about it, in our organizations, we're not necessarily bringing early talent into that. It could be because we make the assumption that they're digital natives, so they already know this. Um,
Oh,
and then I would say the last thing that really blew my mind about AI with this new pool of talent coming in that we're going to help our HR look at, develop, recruit is that there are a lot of reservations about using AI. New talent have a lot of reservations about using AI, and they are too. It's around, environmental responsibility as
mhm.
well as, sort of the ethics behind it, the privacy behind it, those types of
Mhm.
things.
Okay, that
So,
that makes sense, and that's really helpful. Talking about that's the early workforce. What about people that are currently in the workforce who are seasoned professionals? And we're hearing about you've got to make sure that you're using AI, you've got to make sure that you're playing with AI, you've got to make sure that you're testing the things that you can do. So again, it goes beyond having a decent prompt, but it's actually doing things on an automated level for you. What are you seeing in that?
yeah, seeing it a lot with the existing talent, seeing adoption. It's essential. It's compulsory. Most people's jobs are impacted by it. We haven't replaced anyone's jobs with it just yet, right?
Mhm.
But I feel that it is impacting so many jobs. We use it for so many different things. One piece of evidence of that is we launched an AI boot camp. Maybe that was last year, and it was just for a very small group. And then we saw that other people from different types of roles were requesting it. So we said, well, let's kind of change it and make
Mhm.
it specific for this type of role as well. It was an HR practitioner role that also wanted some AI capacity. So I think that most people are seeing that there is ample opportunity for folks who are seasoned professionals to get AI training. I know I've been using it as well for more than just, correcting documents or something like
Right.
that, but, for some of the larger strategic things that I've been doing. But I have to say also, AI hallucinates, y'all. So do double check the work.
Yes, yes, yes. Definitely check your source, have it cite the source, and then check the source that it's citing. I've literally asked
Absolutely.
AI to tell me where it's getting its information. I go to that page and there's no page. And I'm like, AI, okay, you playing games. So
Yeah.
you have to double check. I think it's so interesting because, again, with all of this talk around upskilling and AI coming in, one of the roles that I feel passionate about, and I've talked to other chief of staffs, that AI is not going to replace the chief of staff role. There's functions of this job that it definitely will replace, which is useful and helpful, but it's not going to replace this role because of the capacity for us to have that human oversight, the emotional intelligence. And this is what you had spoke to us in our last session about, which I thought was just amazing, was the emotional regulation aspect of being a chief of staff and how you show up. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that is something that if people really understood, there would be a lot more comfort in. I'm using AI. AI is not going to take my place because it can't do these things.
Yeah, yeah. I hate to think that chiefs of staff are in a safe harbor, but it's looking that way. No, I'm
Right.
kidding. But there is an element to what we do that I think is now getting a forefront, and we are seeing where it is incredibly special. So right now, as we shift, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, we are also shifting to very human-centric skills, like
Yeah.
really seeing the importance of these human-centric skills. In fact, ASAE, which is another association,
Mhm.
they have a set of drivers of change. And that means like, what are all the things when you scan the environment that we should be looking at and thinking about? And one of their drivers of change that I absolutely loved, and this was a few years ago before I knew it would be a thing, hence it being a driver of change because it's very future looking. But this particular driver of change was called More Human Humans.
Oh,
And yes, and as technology grows, so must the human being that is leveraging the technology. We have to become so um, our acuity, our human acuity has to
Mhm.
grow by so much in order to leverage and manage all of this tech use. And by that I mean that the more capable we become, also a little scarier it becomes. And what do
Mhm.
you use it for? How do you collaborate across teams? And so I do find that I am finding we have so many more projects and ideas that we can actually execute on because of technology that are so cross-functional that now we have to figure out how to manage all of the people that are on these projects.
Yeah.
So I would say that it's become incredibly important. Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. Okay. I want to go a little bit back to the educational aspect that you were talking about, more specifically around the universities. Are you finding that universities and organizations, as they are partnering to bring in the new talent, that uh, like what are the things that they're not doing that they should be doing to make sure that they're attracting that right talent?
Not doing, you mean the employers? What are they not doing that they should be
Mhm.
doing?
Mhm.
That's really good. Well, there are a couple of things that we know that they should be doing. So, what we know from early talent is super important to them isn't like nightlife or things
Yeah.
like that. It is actually stability and location. So, providing relocation, anything that signals stability, such as signing
Uh-huh.
bonuses, those
Mhm.
types of things. Those are the things that have to happen. My own personal opinion. So I do oftentimes I'll rattle off things and it's because it comes from a research report, likely a
Right.
NACE research report, which you guys can go on our website and find. But I will make a very clear difference when I give my opinion. And this is my opinion here, having gone through COVID with my own children who are now early talent, not
Mhm.
all of them, I got some old kids, but some of my kids are early talent. And I think that fueled that COVID experience fueled their desire for stability.
Okay.
Um, yeah. Also, early talent and new talent, they like to be in person, maybe hybrid, but they want to be in person. They
Oh,
don't want virtual work. I do. So
right.
more seasoned professionals might because we love the flexibility of that. And we already had a time in our early careers where we got to come into work. We got to wear the outfits. We got to go for the lunches, have the coffees, watch other people work. You know, when you're working remote, you don't get to watch people work. How do they do what they do? How long are they on a particular document or at their desk, right?
Hmm.
So those are some things that we can all align between the folks that prepare the early talent and the
Yep.
people who receive the early talent and the early talent themselves. So those are some of the alignment points that maybe were a little bit surprising to people.
Yeah. I think that's been one of the things that has been a bit of a rub too right now is understanding what does that balance look like? Because like you, I love being remote, but I also understand that those who are coming in, they need that face time with somebody who understands the landscape to help them. And having the virtual relationship is not as strong as that face-to-face interaction. And so you want to make sure that you've got these intentional touch points when you are in the office. And it doesn't feel like, well, I need to be in the office so somebody can watch to make sure that I'm working because you can work effectively at home and you can pass the time. And I have to say, coming out of COVID, when I was going into the office, I was less effective. And that was because I hadn't seen people in a very long time. And so we
Yeah.
wanted to work together, but we wanted to interact. It was just, being there shoulder to shoulder and talking about what was going on. And so finding that balance can be really, really difficult. Are there
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that you've seen that have worked? Like you said, there's the approach doing this hybrid, but are there other things that you've seen that work so you can kind of try to appease to both senses without compromising them fully?
Absolutely. Another place that I've seen this work is, and we often forget about it, but social capital is a piece of your education experience, right? It's where we learn a lot about work, work styles, how we work, how to figure out which degree or certificate to get, how to build a career trajectory that we want. And so really engaging in your network is key, because as soon as I came to Utah, I started reaching out to people who had similar job titles or worked at
Mhm.
companies that I thought were really cool because you really do need to take
Mm,
that time to meet up with people, whether you're remote or not. You need to be spending time on your own professional development, which includes learning getting that wisdom from other people who have been where you would like to go, who have headed off in the direction that you want to go in. There is a great researcher at MIT, Dr. Ray Regans, and he does a lot of research around social capital. And not only do you get wisdom from your social capital, but this is how you often build your advancement and opportunities, whether it's in your organization or outside of your organization. So I think that's a piece that we often forget and that we could be leveraging a lot more.
yeah, and that should just be part of your career development plan. Is how do you make sure that you invest in your social capital so it helps drive the things that you want to accomplish? Again, when you had spoken before, you talked a little bit about that, and the perspective was it was something that I was familiar with, but the way that you had couched it, I was like, I hadn't even thought about that. And just utilizing, I love building network. And the folks that I mentor, that's the first question I ask them is, what does your network look like? I don't have a network. Okay, let's ramp that up because your network is the thing that's going to sometimes help propel you forward and move you in spaces that you are not in and they're already in, and they can absolutely help you.
Absolutely.
As a chief of staff, you've got to build network because it's few chief of staffs that have teams. Some of them do. I've had a team before and I've been an IC more than I have not been an IC. So, talk to us a little bit about, as a chief of staff, if you are an IC, how do you create accountability for people who don't necessarily report to you, but you've got to get them to do stuff?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Accountability with no power, right?
Yeah.
That's the typical role of a chief of staff. We're always tasking and getting work from people, but not necessarily with the authority, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. And by IC, you mean individual contributor,
Hmm.
which I have been a lot. I am currently, and so I think that. Number one, there was something that you said earlier about, it can be a difficult job. And I loved that you said that because it was very affirming to me because there are some days that it flows easily. And then there are some days that there are more challenges because it is the nature of the role. There is a lot of professional isolation in this. If you Google that term, that's a term, I came upon many, many years ago when I worked in academic medicine was around professional isolation because we find that people who are kind of the only in their shop, imagine you're a dentist and you have a large shop, well, you may be the only dentist there and there are other people, hygienists and whomever, and they have each other. So that's kind of the case for a chief of staff. Oftentimes in your organization, you are the only chief of staff, or on
Yeah.
your team, you're the only chief of staff. So you don't really have a lot of people to go to. And that is why the social capital becomes so important.
Yes.
And I think I said that to you when I first met you. I was like, we can kind of speak to each other in a sort of shorthand, right? Like, I don't have to
Mhm.
explain my job and the nuances of it and exactly what I do. And that's reaffirming, which gives us then an opportunity to move into the meat of the conversation. Which, by the way, I wanted to point out too, I found out a lot of that meat about a chief of staff. Your book is right back there. It's in the middle.
You.
So I do highly recommend it. The networking is important, but in the absence of having another chief of staff to talk to, read the book.
Thank you. Read the book.
Yeah.
Read the book. Thank you, Erica. I saw your question. We snuck in the definition of an IC. I hope you heard that, but an IC, just so I can reiterate, because Krys covered that as an independent contributor. That means you don't have a team, and a lot of chief of staffs will sit on a leadership board. They'll sit on a leadership team. They are empowered as their peers who are other C-level, vice presidents, whatever it is, but they don't have a team that directly reports into them. You'll find that in some spaces. Sometimes they'll have program managers, administrative assistants, but it's not often. And so, as a chief of staff, what you'll find is that you have to influence. And the best way to influence is to build a network, build relationships. And that's some of the things that Krys was alluding to is those relationships are the things that are going to help propel you and move you forward because folks are tasked with so many high priority things. And so they may be asking themselves, why do I need to work on your thing when I've got these other things that I've got to focus on? And helping them understand contextually the organizational goals are this, and this is how we're trying to get there, and this is why your piece is so important. And so you might find yourself as an IC. So I see your thank you. So I'm glad that that answered your question. Um, the other question I wanted, oh, did you have another comment,
I
Krys?
did. A little
Yeah.
pro tip backing up to the whole IC
Yeah.
thing is I recently started making my team the other ICs. So, like our director of diversity, I'm like, it's just you. Come, let's be on a team. Because oftentimes, also on our off-sites, um, like retreats and things like that,
Mhm.
people get together by team, and we're all sitting there looking at each other. Our EA, our CEO, like we're all ICs in a lot of ways, right? Like, so it's like, oh, so I've created that. That's our team.
Yes. Yep.
Because to a degree, we all understand we work across functions. We don't necessarily have authority. These people do not directly report to us, but we
Mhm.
still need things from them. Also, not knowing where our projects always fit and with whom, and then
Right.
managing, like, we'll have our own projects also that we have to manage across these teams. And so I have found, a shorthand with other ICs, even if they're not chiefs of staff.
Yeah, yeah. So something that's really interesting, because I want to stay along this vein, is chief of staffs. Sometimes it feels like we own things, sometimes it feels like we don't own things. And you always hear chief of staff strategy, chief of staff strategy. And you may not directly own the strategy, but you definitely have a vested interest in that strategy. And so, again, talking about the fact that a lot of us may not have a team, how do you have the most impact on the workforce and strategy, even though you may not necessarily own it directly?
Yeah, I think when you don't directly own something, finding ways to stay attached to that work that aren't
Mhm.
necessarily a heavy lift. So there are a lot of different team meetings that they can know to expect me at or to pop into. There's a lot of communication happening on Slack, those types of things. I don't suggest this, but sometimes I do it. I do volunteer myself for some things just so I can be close to the work. So like if someone is putting an RFP together, which is a very strategic and kind of high level, thinky type of project. Yeah, I'll think through it with you. If we are needing to parse through some data and sort of make sense of it, even though I don't own it, well, eventually it's going to fall on my plate anyways to have to
Right.
take action on it. So let me sit with you. Let's talk through this together. So I think that finding places to invite yourself into the work, or to see where you can get people to invite you in to pieces of their work without looking like it's some sort of oversight or you're there to check on things, but that you are there to co-create, to co-work, to
Yeah.
lend your lens, and with some transparency and honesty. Like, listen, I'm gonna see this later anyways, so why don't I look at it now? Let's
Yeah.
work together now. It also helps create some comfort for the folks that you're working with because they know that you will get the work later. And it's nice to say, hey, we agreed on this on the front end. Here's the direction we said we would go with it. And that way, it's also not a surprise when you see the work later,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Well, and if you're building those relationships and you're doing things together, there's something about, so you mentioned collaboration early on in this conversation. There's something about having effective collaboration with others and feeling like you've got a vested interest. And so, I mean, you win together, you lose together, but it's amazing when you win together because then it's like, you know what? I talked to this person. I was just having a conversation with a peer and I said, I'm trying to build this thing. This is what I've done in the past. And it's just, I'm struggling a little bit. And then she dropped me a note later in the day and said, why don't we just do this together? Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, let's do this together because you're going to bring a lens that I don't have. I'm going to bring a lens that you don't have. And the independent things that we could have created is going to pale in comparison to that main thing that we create together. And so I love your comment of you just get a whole bunch of ICs together and you're like, we are our own team.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
team of ICs.
the
And I
team.
will say, where I have chosen to insert myself, and maybe other people have made this mistake as well, don't insert yourself in your weakness. Find your strength and insert yourself there. And I will say, one of the things I've noticed is my strength that other people tend to be very frustrated with, and this may be particularly a chief of staff strength, but it is taking large volumes of data or information and really synthesizing that into some quick sound bite that is authentic and true and keeps with the integrity of all of the input, but the output is like very small and bite size. And that comes from, putting things together for the board or whatever. You'll get all these reports from every department and you're like, okay, but what's the crux of it here? What's the main point or the main story? So I have found that teams that need to do that sometimes do feel that I'm helpful in that way, where I can say, oh, you got this huge, large survey back. Yeah, I'll look at that with you.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. I want to go back to something that you just said because I love this. You said don't necessarily insert yourself if it's your weakness. Although we're always told find our weaknesses and try to figure out how to make it a strength, right? So, but when you said, it, I'm like, there's got to be a story behind that. And I know I can think of something, but help my folks understand, beside the obvious, why would you not want to insert yourself where you have a weakness to try to make it strong, and you want to insert yourself into your strength and not feel like you have a pop up your collar moment?
Yeah, yeah. So a long time ago, came upon Clifton Strengths. I worked for this fabulous associate dean, and she ran our department as a strengths-based team. When
Mhm.
I first got there, I did not know what that was, and eventually did Clifton Strengths. This is not a plug for them, but I do just love it. I wound up becoming a coach because I was like, this really works. But the way the strengths work is that they're kind of ranked. And I really did find them to be true. My top five strengths were definitely my top five strengths, and my bottom five, child, were my bottom five. And now I can't remember what they are, but I know them up here. I know them when I see them, my
Mhm.
bottom five. But what I used to do very specifically was look for people who have the strengths that are not in my top five. Like if my bottom five are in their top five, we're going to be a great complement. The reason that I say to do it that way, and you don't have to do it that way. This is the way that I do it. I look for complementing strengths and not competing strengths because I'm working for efficiency. I don't know about y'all, but I would guess we got a lot of work to do. So spending the time at work working on my weaknesses or where I'm not strong, I find that to be a heavy lift and too much of a risk because flailing or
Yeah.
failing in front of my team or taking them down that road can really diminish trust.
Mhm.
And so I just find it's easier for me to work on those types of skills in other places, in other ways, in other areas. Um, and so, yeah, that's why I say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can
No.
get burnt,
Yeah.
and it's not a bad thing. Everybody's got like weaknesses, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I think especially so when I think about the things that I need to develop further, those are easier conversations to have with a mentor or a sponsor
yes,
and look for
yeah,
opportunities to grow and be better and not necessarily in a situation where, I mean, chief of staffs, everything is hot, everything.
hmm
It's rare that you're focused on something that is not pivotal for the business. And so you
yeah,
want to make sure, like you said, you want to find ways where you're working with somebody and things are complementary and you're moving things forward because
right,
very type A, we're very red. We want to do the best that we possibly can. I've got a vision, I've got a focus, I'm moving in this direction, and it can be very, very challenging. So I
yeah,
really
yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, play to your strengths with your team. I think save your learning and development for appropriate spaces. Like, don't
Yeah.
learn and develop on your team. I think it's just the compassionate way to go about things. And it's so funny because y'all drop it in the chat. Maybe there are others out here. I might be the only type B chief of staff that I know. It's so funny, but I work for a strong type A. So we keep it together. It's a good balance. I'm a very organized type B is how I have heard it described. A very organized type B. I'm very go with the flow, very chill. But I have found that that works well because everything is a fire. And so it's nice that I usually am unruffled. I'm like, oh, we can figure that out. It's
Nice,
fine.
nice,
That's the emotional regulation. I'm like, it'll be
nice.
fine.
Nice. Well, and Kayla she just put a thing in the chat that says, same, Chris, I'm a type B for a type A. Love it. So you're
Yes.
some of your people here. Um,
Yeah.
I want to jump a little bit into some of the things that you had discussed around emotional regulation for chief of staff also. Can you help my folks understand what does that mean? What is that
Right.
about?
Yeah. So emotional regulation isn't about not having emotions, right? It is about being equipped to manage the emotions that you do have
Mhm.
appropriately and in the right time and the right place. We all get frustrated. We all get, have some fears going into work, those types of things, but it is the expression of it. And are you equipped to recognize it
Hmm.
and know what you need and solve for it on your own? Right?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Um, and by solve for it on your own, I don't mean that you go off by yourself. Solve for it on your own means that you are the holder of your solution. So
Yeah.
sometimes you need another person, but you have built a network. And so you have people you can go to because you took charge of that part of your work. Now, I will say, interestingly, some of everything's related in the world. The connectedness, I see a lot of connectedness and
Mhm.
emotional regulation and this whole idea about education, learning and development are connected. What we know is emotion impacts cognition. Right? So if you are very emotionally dysregulated, you ain't gonna grow and develop a whole lot either. So they do go together.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And why is that even important?
Yeah, well, these non-technical skills that we're talking about are
Mhm.
85% of your career success.
Yeah.
Um, and so, we had been talking earlier about like what to train for, and it was those technical skills. But, we are seeing that shift too to that 85%, those non-technical skills like collaboration and those human-centric skills. And so, I do just think that they play well together.
Yeah.
It's super important because I think being emotionally regulated and someone that focuses on your own professional development and learning and development builds trust and rapport with your team. I think it's something that shows you to be highly coachable and adaptable.
Yeah.
Adaptability is a sign of mental health. So these are all things that people are looking to you for to really be like that solid rock, to be, cool in the fire and dry in the sea. Like people are looking to you for that. And so having really robust, built out, non-technical skills
Mhm.
is important in our role, probably like no other.
Yeah. Yeah. And back in the day, we used to call them soft skills. I don't know if
Yeah.
they still call them that
They
today,
they call
but
them durable skills now, durable or
yeah.
non-technical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
not, you hope that these are things that you have intuitively. You can definitely learn them. But in my opinion, I think they're tougher to learn because a technical skill can be very logical. Like if I'm going to code, if I'm going to develop, these are the things that I'm going to do. When you're learning those skills to be adaptable, it's not as easy and as clear. Or for chief of staffs, we know that our environments are always ambiguous. You read the job description, you know what the job is, you get in, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, as long as you can do these things, but I need you to do all of this other stuff. And I don't really know how I need you to do it, but I need you to go and figure it out and do it for me. And so
Right.
it's, I like the term durable skills, the non-technical skills. And what's interesting is that that is a large portion of our role is learning how to deal with personalities, deal with situations that may not have a logical way to approach them, but you've got to use other skills to be sensitive on how to approach them. I'll tell
Right.
folks a lot of times that you're the heart of the organization. What does that mean? Well, I'm looking out for your well-being as well as your ability to grow. I'm looking out
Mhm.
for two people are scrapping. Why are they scrapping? And it's not that I
Yep.
get involved into their lives, but there may be an aspect of their lives that are impacting their ability to show up in the best way possible.
Hmm.
Being a chief of staff, you may be that sounding board or that resource to help them so they can say, I need to just take, 15, take 15 and breathe.
Yeah.
And that's why I really loved your view on emotional regulation and understanding what the dysregulation is.
Yeah. And that's why I teach this stuff because I did feel like there was a lot of ambiguity around it and there didn't need to be. There is a science to emotion. I actually was teaching this last night and this is my jam. This is my 5 to 9, is the extension of the work that I do around like professional development
Yep.
and chief of staffing. It is this extension as to like where and how do you build these skills? There are very few known places that we can say like how we say, oh, I took CPR. That's a technical skill. We don't know what to say about, well, I trained my non-technical skills. Like
Right.
we're not
Right.
even sure which ones those are. So I have mapped them and laid them out because it was a need that I had.
Yeah.
Almost maybe a decade ago, I was like, let me let me get on this emotional regulation because I feel like there's something here. I feel like there's something to honing these non-durable, these durable skills. And I think it was because having worked in workforce, no
Hmm.
employer ever asked me for a dysregulated, unhealthy, homogenous workforce, right? They weren't really asking me for technical training skills. You can find those places. Their biggest need, often when they came to me, was like, how can I get people to show up for work, not cuss their boss out, not have
Right.
absenteeism issues,
Right.
not avoid work? Like, how can we do that? So it really prompted me to look at the science behind emotional regulation and how can you build and identify specific skills with those, know when to use them and what they are. And I'll say like a number one example, and I did it before I got on here, and I probably should have done it again while I was on here, but it is deep breathing, which sounds so fluffy, but it actually resets your
Mhm.
nervous system and it
Yeah.
helps you not feel or your body not believe it's in fight or flight. So when you go into these difficult conversations, you are reset and you
Yeah.
are setting the emotional tone of the meeting.
Nice, nice.
So,
I
yeah.
have to say, so I have the best attendees. So Kate Carlson just dropped this in the chat for us. She said the term soft skills emerged during the industrial mobilization for World War II to juxtaposition the hard material. Thank you, Kate.
I love that history. Yeah.
We're always learning. I'm always learning.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause for just 1 second because we're going to move into the Q&A. We're getting some questions, but I want to definitely do more questions. Let me share my screen really quickly because I love it when people join. I love the new folks that join, and I love the existing folks that join. This is just a reminder. These happen every month, first Friday of the month. They are free, and it's just like the conversation you're hearing Chris and I have. We two professionals trying to figure stuff out. We don't always get it right, but we try to get it right at least most of the time. This is stuff that you're not going to see in a job description. This is stuff that, it's not necessarily theory, it's the experiences that we are having to help us excel in our roles. And so my assistant will drop this in the chat. If you want to learn more, set up some time with me and let's chat about the chief of staff role, whether you're new, whether you've been in role for a while, and you've just got questions and you want to excel. Next month, I have one of my mentors and coaches who is going to be speaking to us, Jalima Cook. She is another amazing woman in this space. And you will learn a whole bunch from hearing this conversation that Jalima and I are going to have. And so I wanted to quickly remind you all. And then the last thing I want to remind you, my assistant actually put in about my book. If you're interested in purchasing the book, you've got a direct link. And I talked a little bit about, but not a lot, the Chief of Staff Academy, which is a training program for people who are, again, either new in role or you are in role and you want to get better. If you've got questions, set up some time with me. Let's chat and let's talk about what's next for you. I'm going to stop sharing now because I want to jump into because I've seen some questions. So let me stop the window. And then one of the questions that I just saw, it said, given what you've been discussing, what do you feel the chief of staff role is in supporting a principal who may be struggling with their own regulation, especially younger execs at startups? Thank you for that question, Kathy. That's a great question. Oh my gosh.
That's really good. First of all, so sorry that you're going through this. If indeed this is your situation, that can be a struggle and it can be tough. I get that question a lot, actually, is what do you do about other people's emotional regulation? And the truth be told, you can't force other people to do anything. You can lead a horse to water. But what you can do is do not get pulled out of your own emotional regulation. That's when it's time to double down on your own emotional regulation because oftentimes people will mirror you, right? If they
Mhm.
see that you're not getting ruffled, they may be likely not to get ruffled, right? Don't ever say calm down though, because apparently that does not work well. I will say, having raised my own, founder and CEO of a startup. He is very emotionally regulated because he had me for a mom, and these are things that we talk about. But he has some good buddies that also have founded CEOs. You know, coming out of that whole like Harvard, MIT kind of group. They do a lot of startups. They're out in California. That's where they do these things. And you do have a lot of CEOs and founders who are early in their careers who maybe haven't heard about professional emotional
Yeah.
regulation or emotional regulation for the workplace, never has crossed their mind. And so I do think that sometimes there's an opportunity to put it on the L team agenda, put it on the leadership team agenda, put it
Yeah.
on the executive team agenda, put it as a standing item. We instituted it as a standing item about workplace culture. That's where you get to have those conversations. You don't always have to address their emotional dysregulation
Yeah.
head on, but you can do some learning and development around emotional regulation. Hey, I think this will help everybody. It's something I've been using. It's a skill that I have that maybe you really like. You too can have it. It's free 99. Like, here's the information. One of those tips would be um, and it sounds like it could work. I like to focus on the cumulative stress reaction. And that's where it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. We tend to react instead of respond, but react to situations sort of as an accumulation.
Hmm.
So we're coming in already on 5 or 6, and one more thing happens, and now we're on 10. We're really learning to address each situation as its own individual situation and to really ask yourself the question I literally really do ask myself is if nothing else had happened today, if this was the only thing that happened today, how would I actually respond to this?
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. We got
So that's a good
another
reset.
amazing question from Wendy. So I'm going to read this to you. It says, what do you find is the most effective way to elevate DEI related objectives and importantly, success stories? Sometimes those are not included in formal OKR programs and probably should always be. I agree, Wendy. So what have you seen work well? And as a chief of staff, how can we promote this best?
Right. I think number one, knowing the history around DEI, affirmative action, all of those types of things, because then you can better identify concrete examples as to where this worked, how it worked, and why. I will say that there was a study done about some venture capitalists, and it had everything to do with DEI, which isn't a space that you expect to hear people talking about this. And what it really showed was that the teams that were diverse in many different ways had better outcomes. So I think that finding things that maybe aren't personal or personal to your organization can work well.
Mhm.
So I think, again, providing those concrete examples. So looking for where this has worked and worked well. The other thing is sometimes you have to make the business case for it because everybody isn't just altruistic or just agrees or just thinks this is right. So sometimes you have to make the business case for it. My personal business case for DEI as it pertains to early talent and this new workforce that we are going to need to recruit to continue to backfill these roles that will be getting, right? Is that it just makes good business sense. The reason is this. We got more seats than butts,
Mhm.
meaning there will be more jobs than people to fill them just because we are in a population crisis in the United States, right? So it means, and everybody else is not necessarily in a population crisis around the world. So that means we have to look wherever we can look for good talent. You
Mhm.
can't be that picky and choosy and think, well, I just want to build a homogenous workforce. That's not
Mhm.
an option. That is
Mhm.
not, you're going to have to go wherever, speak whatever, say
Mhm.
what to be able to build a workforce that actually works.
Yeah. Well, and everything is global. We have left the days where we're just very siloed within our four walls or
Yeah.
across the wall. Like everything is very, very global. And we
Yeah.
touch so many different areas, cultures, people, and
Yep.
have one view again is it's a very siloed and myopic view. And people see that. It's reflected in the way that we work, in our products, in our services, and there's so many entrepreneurs out there. Don't think you are the only big fish in the sea because
Yeah.
you never
Yeah.
know who is nipping at your heels to take that place. And that next
Yeah.
big fish it may be willing to do the things that you thought, well, I don't need to do these. It's not important to me. So,
Yeah.
Krys, you're amazing.
Well,
You are
thank you. As are you.
I I loved the questions that we had from our folks that dialed in. They're always so
Great questions.
amazing. You'll all get a copy of this recording for yourselves to replay. And like I said, make sure you join us next month. They are Just as amazing. I want to leave you, we've got a minute, with any closing words that you want to leave to the audience.
Well, I just want to encourage everyone to hang in there as chiefs of staff. Many of us are ICs, and so it does take other chiefs of staff to encourage each other, to affirm one another. Sometimes it can be thankless. Sometimes we are not appreciated by our peers, but so many times we are. And for us to really refocus our lens onto the many, many wins that we have, we wouldn't be in these roles if we didn't have more wins than losses. And so I think that keeping perspective is really key. I got to remind myself of that as well because we're always expected to show up and be positive and have a good day every day.
Mhm.
And just I'm so grateful that we have this space to come together and talk about the real things that matter to us and some of the challenges and some of the wins.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. I hope wherever you are, you have a great rest of your day, whether it's starting or ending. Some of you starting your weekend. Have a wonderful weekend. And I will see you next month with Chat with the Chief.
Thank you. Bye.